Welcome to our YouTube channel, The Alien Tales, and please ensure that you have subscribed.
The alien artifact showed me alternative timelines. In every one, she betrays me. I've seen 1,000 futures, and in each one, she's my downfall. Yet in this reality, I still can't walk away. The crystalline artifact pulsed with an otherworldly luminescence in the depths of the Kepler Station laboratory. Dr. Cassian Vex leaned over the examination table, his weathered hands trembling as he adjusted the quantum scanner. 3 months of excavation on Europa's ice-locked surface had yielded nothing but disappointment until this moment. "Extraordinary," he whispered, watching the readings cascade across his holographic display. The artifact's structure defied conventional physics. Its molecular arrangement seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Behind him, the lab door hissed open. Dr. Lyra Donovan entered, her auburn hair catching the sterile lighting as she carried 2 steaming cups of synthetic coffee. Her emerald eyes sparkled with the same curiosity that had drawn Cassian to her during their university days at Neo-Cambridge. "Still at it?" she asked, setting a cup beside his workstation. Her fingers brushed his shoulder, sending familiar warmth through his chest. "You've been here for 18 hours straight." Cassian turned, grateful for both the caffeine and her presence. "Lyra, this could change everything. The quantum signatures suggest this artifact can manipulate temporal perception. We might be looking at technology that allows consciousness to observe parallel timeline branches." She moved closer, studying the crystalline structure with professional fascination. The artifact seemed to respond to her proximity, its internal light intensifying. "Temporal mechanics," she murmured. "The theoretical applications alone." Their eyes met, and Cassian felt the same magnetic pull that had drawn them together 15 years ago. Despite their professional partnership and romantic history, some invisible thread always seemed to bind them together, even through the complications that had driven them apart multiple times. "Should we activate it?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cassian nodded, his finger hovering over the activation sequence. Neither of them could have predicted what horrors the artifact would reveal. The moment Cassian initiated the artifact's resonance frequency, reality fractured around him. The laboratory dissolved into a kaleidoscope of possibilities, and suddenly he stood in a different version of the same room, older, more advanced, bathed in red emergency lighting. In this timeline, he watched himself 30 years older, gray-haired and broken, staring at security footage on a wall-mounted display. The younger Lyra on the screen moved through the station's corridors with purpose, carrying a data cylinder toward the main communication array. "She sold us out," the older Cassian said to someone off-screen. 20 years of marriage, and she sold our research to the hegemony. They're coming for the artifact, and they'll kill everyone who's seen it." The vision shifted, showing Lyra in a clandestine meeting with shadowy figures wearing the insignia of the corporate hegemony. Money changed hands, enough to fund a lifetime of luxury. Her face showed no remorse, only cold calculation. "The temporal research is too dangerous for independent scientists," she told her handlers. Cassian would never understand the bigger picture. Sometimes betrayal is necessary for the greater good. Present-day Cassian jolted back to reality, gasping as the laboratory reformed around him. Lyra stood beside him, concern etched across her features. "Ga?" You went completely rigid for about 30 seconds. "What happened?" He stared at her, searching her emerald eyes for any trace of the calculated betrayal he'd witnessed. She looked exactly the same, beautiful, intelligent, trustworthy. The woman he'd loved for half his life. I saw something. Another timeline. You were." He stopped himself, unable to voice what he'd seen. "The artifact works, Lyra. It showed me a possible future." She squeezed his hand reassuringly. "What kind of future?" Cassian couldn't answer. "How do you tell someone you love that you've seen them destroy you?" Over the following days, Cassian became obsessed with the artifact. Each activation revealed another timeline, another possibility, another betrayal. In some versions, Lyra sold their research to corporations. In others, she abandoned him for rival scientists. In one particularly painful vision, she testified against him in a galactic tribunal, claiming he'd stolen her work. The constants remained unchanged. They always found the artifact together, They always fell in love again, and she always, inevitably, betrayed him. Lyra noticed his growing distance. "You've been different since we activated it," she said, finding him in the lab during his third consecutive all-nighter. "You barely look at me anymore. What did you see in that vision?" Cassian rubbed his exhausted eyes. The artifact sat dormant on the examination table, but he could feel its presence like a malevolent whisper. "I've been conducting more tests. Each time I see different possibilities, different timelines, and in every single one you." He stopped, the words catching in his throat. How could he explain that in timeline 847, she poisoned him to steal credit for the discovery? Or that in timeline 1203, she seduced his research partner to gain access to his private notes? What, Cassian? You're scaring me." He turned to face her fully, taking in her worried expression, the way she twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit from their brief marriage years ago. "In every timeline I've observed, our relationship ends in betrayal. You choose someone or something else over me. Always." Lyra's face cycled through emotions. Confusion, hurt, anger. "That's insane. These are just possibilities, right? Theoretical branches? They don't define who I am in this reality, don't they?" Cassian asked quietly. "If the pattern holds true across infinite variations, what does that say about the fundamental nature of our relationship?" The question hung between them like a poisonous cloud, contaminating everything they'd built together. The artifact's revelations created a schism between them that widened with each passing day. Lyra threw herself into her own research, analyzing the device's quantum mechanics while Cassian continued his timeline observations. The station felt smaller now, filled with unspoken accusations and growing mistrust. "You're treating me like a criminal," she confronted him during a rare moment when they occupied the lab simultaneously. "Every time you look at me, I see suspicion in your eyes. This isn't fair, Cass." He paused his calculations, stylus hovering over his datapad. "The patterns are consistent, Lyra. Across 2,847 observed timelines, you betray me in 2,847 different ways. The statistical probability of deviation in our current reality is virtually zero." "Statistics aren't destiny," she shot back, her voice rising. "You're letting this alien device destroy what we have right now because of things that haven't happened and might never happen." "But they will happen," Cassian insisted. "The artifact doesn't show random possibilities. It reveals quantum certainties across dimensional probability streams. These futures exist whether we acknowledge them or not." Lyra slammed her palm against the workbench, causing several instruments to jump. "Then why are you still here? If you're so certain I'll betray you, why haven't you transferred to another station? Why haven't you destroyed the artifact? Why do you keep torturing yourself?" The question struck him like a physical blow because he didn't have an answer. Every logical calculation told him to run, to hide the artifact, to protect himself from inevitable heartbreak. Yet he remained, drawn to her like a moth to flame, unable to break free from the gravitational pull of their connection. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "Maybe I'm hoping to find a timeline where things are different, where you choose me." "I choose you in this timeline," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Right here, right now. Isn't that enough?" But Cassian had seen too much to believe in hope anymore. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived on Kepler Station aboard the next supply transport, her credentials identifying her as a temporal mechanics specialist from the Galactic Science Consortium. Cassian had never requested consultation, which made her appearance suspicious. "The artifact you've discovered represents a significant threat to temporal stability," she explained during their first meeting. "Our deep space monitoring stations detected quantum fluctuations emanating from this sector. We believe you've activated a Class 7 temporal observation device." Lyra leaned forward in the conference room chair. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means," Dr. Vasquez continued, "that prolonged exposure to timeline observation can create paradoxical feedback loops. The more you observe alternate possibilities, the more likely you are to unconsciously influence your current reality to match those observations." Cassian felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "You're suggesting that by seeing Lyra's betrayals, I'm making them more likely to occur?" I'm suggesting that temporal observation creates quantum entanglement between the observer and the observed possibilities. Your expectations, fears, and beliefs begin to shape reality itself. It's called the observer paradox, and it's why these devices were buried on dead worlds. The revelation struck Cassian like a physical blow. Had his growing suspicions and cold treatment of Lyra already set their relationship on the path to destruction? Were his observations of betrayal becoming self-fulfilling prophecies? There's more, Dr. Vasquez added grimly. The corporate hegemony has learned of your discovery. They're dispatching a fleet to claim the artifact. You have perhaps 48 hours before they arrive. Lyra's face went pale. What happens if they get it? The hegemony will use temporal observation to manipulate probability streams for profit and control. They'll reshape reality to ensure their dominance across all possible timelines. The artifact cannot fall into their hands. As if summoned by their conversation, the artifact in the adjacent laboratory began to pulse with renewed intensity, as though sensing the approaching convergence of multiple possible futures. With the hegemony fleet approaching, Cassian and Lyra faced an impossible decision. They could destroy the artifact, eliminating both its potential for good and the threat it represented. Or they could attempt to escape with it, knowing that the hegemony would pursue them across the galaxy. There's a third option, Lyra said quietly as they stood before the pulsing crystal in the darkened laboratory. We could activate it one final time. Together. Cassian looked at her sharply. The quantum entanglement risk might allow us to choose which timeline becomes reality, she finished. If we're both connected to the device during activation, we might be able to consciously guide the probability streams toward a future where the artifact is safe and we're not constantly running. Dr. Vasquez shook her head vehemently. The neural feedback could kill you both. Or worse, scatter your consciousness across multiple timelines simultaneously. You'd experience every possible version of your lives at once. Better than letting the hegemony reshape reality, Lyra argued. And maybe we can find a timeline where things work out differently for us. Cassian studied her face in the artifact's ethereal glow. Despite everything he'd seen, despite all the betrayals witnessed across countless possibilities, he still loved her. The pull between them transcended dimensional boundaries, existing as a constant across every timeline he'd observed. You know what I've seen, he said softly. In every future, you choose something else over me. Why would this time be different? Lyra reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his skin. Because this time we're making the choice consciously. Together. Maybe the betrayals happen because we never trusted each other completely. Maybe this is our chance to break the pattern. Through the station's viewports, they could see the first flashes of light as the hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Time was running out. If we do this, Cassian said, there's no guarantee we'll survive as ourselves. We might become something entirely different. Then we face that together too, Lyra replied, her emerald eyes reflecting the artifact's alien light. Hand in hand, Cassian and Lyra activated the artifact's deepest resonance frequency. Reality exploded around them as their consciousness expanded across dimensional barriers, touching every possible version of their lives simultaneously. They experienced it all. The betrayals, the love affairs, the scientific triumphs, the bitter divorces, the partnerships that saved worlds and the conflicts that destroyed them. In some timelines, they were enemies from the start. In others, they never met at all. But in every possibility where their paths crossed, the same magnetic attraction drew them together, followed inevitably by the same destructive patterns. Through the quantum storm of infinite possibilities, Cassian finally understood. The betrayals weren't inherent to Lyra's character. They were the result of his own fears and insecurities creating self-fulfilling prophecies. In timeline after timeline, his suspicion and emotional withdrawal drove her to seek connection elsewhere, often with tragic consequences. I see it now. His voice echoed across dimensional space. I created the very pattern I feared, and I enabled it, Lyra's consciousness replied. In every timeline where I betray you, it's because I give up fighting for us. I choose the easier path instead of doing the work to rebuild trust. Together, they began to weave a new possibility. A timeline where understanding replaced suspicion, where they chose to fight for their relationship instead of surrendering to apparent destiny. The artifact responded to their combined will, its crystal structure shifting and realigning as probability streams converged toward their consciously chosen future. The process was agonizing. Every cell in their bodies felt like it was being torn apart and rebuilt. Their consciousness stretched across infinity before snapping back to a single, focused reality. Their reality, the one they were creating together. The hegemony fleet materialized around Kepler Station just as the artifact completed its transformation. Instead of the powerful temporal observation device they'd come to claim, they found only a crystalline sculpture, beautiful but inert, its quantum properties permanently altered. 6 months after the hegemony's disappointed departure, Cassian and Lyra worked side by side in their rebuilt laboratory. The experience with the artifact had changed them both in subtle but profound ways. They remembered fragments of the other timelines, enough to understand the patterns they needed to break, but not so much that the knowledge overwhelmed their present reality. The quantum resonance equations are finally stabilizing, Lyra announced, reviewing their latest calculations. They'd been working on a new project, using principles learned from the artifact to develop communication technology that could bridge vast interstellar distances instantaneously. Cassian looked up from his workstation, noting how the morning light caught the gold highlights in her auburn hair. Any success with the preliminary tests? Actually, yes. She turned to face him, excitement bright in her emerald eyes. I received a message from Dr. Chun on the research station in the Vega system. The signal traveled 12 light-years in less than a second. For a moment, the old suspicion tried to surface. Why hadn't she mentioned Dr. Chun before? Was this the beginning of another betrayal pattern? But Cassian recognized the thought for what it was. An echo of possibilities they'd consciously chosen to abandon. Instead of retreating into suspicion, he made a different choice. That's incredible work, Lyra. How did you solve the quantum entanglement stability problem? Her smile widened as she moved to his side of the lab, pulling up holographic displays of her calculations. I remembered something from our artifact experience, the way consciousness could influence quantum states through focused intention. I built a cognitive interface that allows operators to stabilize entanglement through active mental participation. As she explained her breakthrough, Cassian felt the familiar warmth of intellectual partnership combined with deep emotional connection. This was what they'd been fighting for across infinite timelines. Not just love, but true collaboration between equals. Their relationship faced its first major test when the Galactic Science Consortium offered Lyra the position of Chief Temporal Research Director, a prestigious appointment that would require her to relocate to the consortium's headquarters in the Centauri system. In the old patterns, this would have been the moment of betrayal. Cassian would have withdrawn, assuming she'd choose career advancement over their partnership. Lyra would have interpreted his distance as lack of support and made her decision in isolation. The result would have been resentment, recrimination, and eventual separation. But they'd seen those futures and consciously chose a different path. It's an incredible opportunity, Cassian said when she showed him the official offer. The Temporal Research Division needs someone with your expertise and integrity, especially after what we learned about the artifact's dangers. Lyra studied his face carefully. You really mean that? You're not just saying what you think I want to hear. I'm saying what I actually think. But I'd be lying if I claimed I wasn't worried about what this means for us. She set down the datapad and took his hands. Then let's talk about it. Really talk, not just assume we know what the other is thinking. They spent hours discussing possibilities, long-distance collaboration, joint research projects that could justify Cassian joining her at the consortium, or alternative arrangements that could allow them to maintain their partnership while pursuing individual opportunities. In the old patterns, Lyra said as they watched Europa's ice fields through the laboratory viewport, I would have made this decision alone and then presented it to you as a fait accompli. Or I would have turned down the opportunity and resented you for it later. And I would have either pushed you to take it while secretly hoping you'd refuse, or assumed you were abandoning me and started building walls before you could hurt me. But this time, Cassian squeezed her hand. This time, we decide together. Whatever we choose as partners. The weight of infinite possibilities pressed around them, but for the first time, the future felt genuinely open. 1 year later, Cassian stood in the observation deck of the research vessel Temporal Horizon, watching the swirling nebula of the Horsehead region drift past the viewport. Lyra worked at a nearby console, coordinating with research teams across 3 star systems in their groundbreaking study of natural temporal phenomena. They'd found a third option, neither separation nor the sacrifice of individual ambitions, but a new kind of partnership that transcended traditional boundaries. The consortium had approved funding for a mobile research platform that allowed them to pursue temporal studies throughout the galaxy while maintaining their collaborative relationship. "Signal from the Vega team coming through," Lyra announced. "They've detected what might be another artifact, this one showing signs of precognitive rather than temporal observation capabilities." Cassian joined her at the console, their shoulders touching as they reviewed the incoming data. "Should we investigate? Are you asking if we should risk encountering another device that might show us disturbing possibilities about our future?" He considered the question seriously. They'd learned that knowledge of potential betrayals and failures was both a gift and a curse. It provided the awareness necessary to make different choices, but it also carried the weight of infinite disappointment and fear. "I think," he said slowly, "that we've learned how to handle difficult knowledge. We've proven that awareness of destructive patterns can lead to conscious choices to break them." Lyra smiled, the expression reaching her emerald eyes in a way that still made his heart skip beats. "Then yes, let's investigate. But this time we go in knowing that whatever we see, good or bad, we face it together." As the temporal horizon changed course toward the Vega system, Cassian reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. The alien artifact had shown him 1,000 futures where she betrayed him, but in doing so, it had also revealed the one truth that transcended all timelines. Love wasn't about avoiding betrayal or guaranteeing happy endings. It was about choosing, moment by moment, to build something together despite uncertainty. In this reality, the one they'd consciously chosen and continued to choose every day, they'd finally learned to trust not in guaranteed outcomes, but in their commitment to keep choosing each other, no matter what possibilities the universe revealed. The stars ahead beckoned with infinite mysteries, and they faced them as they now faced everything. Together, aware, and free to write their own story across the cosmos.